Hello, everyone. In this module, we turn to community health assessment and improvement, where we will focus on a social ecological perspective of the multiple influences on the health status of a population and incorporate appropriate measures of health and illness, including risk factors, into a community health needs assessment activity and develop a community health improvement strategy that identifies community priorities and mobilizes community resources to effectively address agreed upon priorities. To highlight measures of health and illness, including risk factors, we'll turn back to the epidemic scorecard that we briefly looked at in Module 1. Let's now create our own scorecard of public health matters, but let's first get a sense of the magnitude of these matters. Please look through these next 3 slides. How do we measure population health? We can look at the leading causes of death, the actual causes of death. The age-adjusted years of potential life lost can be a very useful measure. And look at the impact of these social and behavioral factors on quality-adjusted life years. Now let's turn to our scorecard. As an exercise, on your own or with your group, write down the public health matters you believe to have the most significant impact on overall health status. Place each into a box or rectangle proportional to the importance of that matter as a public health problem. Your most important diseases will be in the largest boxes or rectangles. And actually, here's another really interesting exercise that you can do or look through on your own. How are causes of death determined? Do we use the underlying risk and contributing factors to classify causes of death? Or strictly the disease or injury? I hope you have time to take a look at this on your own. And before we look back at our case studies, it's important to understand how these risk factors and assets work together in an ecological model. To review, this model reminds us that our health is influenced by the interaction between multiple levels all around us, like the individual or interpersonal level, the intrapersonal or group community level, and the physical, social, and political environments. We're using this key public health theoretical framework to understand community health assessment and improvement. So let's now turn to our case studies. In this module's case studies, we can actually still diagnose the same themes, especially the ones of specific focus in the milk outbreak case studies from Module 1, such as that of scientific, legal, ethical, and economic issues that many of you touched on. In these Module 2 case studies, 3 of them, we'll be thinking about categories of factors that influence health in populations. From the ecological perspective, as we've said, we concentrate on the interaction of multiple factors and pathways. Assessing risk factors, we determine their increased likelihood of causing a certain condition or disease. And essential to public health practice today are social and cultural determinants, such as social status and standing. And we look toward global health influences, like population, pollution, poverty, just to name a few examples. For this unit, we want your attention to be directly focused on the categories of factors that influence health in populations. When responding to each of these case studies, be sure to keep in mind that we are assessing or monitoring health at the population level with population-minded, not clinical-minded parameters. Looking at the carbon nanotubes case study first, we can clearly see that the ethical issues at play here are having a significant role. The development of CNT-based applications in a wide range of products is expected to provide great societal benefit. However, worker safety and health is a cornerstone of responsible development of an emergent technology because workers are the first people in society to be exposed to the products of the technology. And evidence in animal studies show lung exposures and cancers like what result from asbestos. The ethical question then becomes, is it ethical to move forward with CNT production and use with the unknown magnitude and implications of its health risk? And what types of public health surveillance might then be necessary? Moving on to our second case study and the Deepwater Gulf Horizon oil spill, which most of you probably remember when this happened back in April of 2010. And keeping within the same framework of the socio-ecological model and measuring population health when thinking about this event, what are some of the potential health consequences of this Gulf oil spill, and to what general categories do they fit? There are multiple angles for studying this tragic event. This week in our conferencing exercise, we're going to think about the role of communication with the public in situations of disaster. How is the work of public health professionals helped or hindered by communication choices? And what other factors might also contribute to or compromise our understanding of the effects of the oil spill on human health and well-being? Let's now shift to Wyandotte County, Kansas. Where's Kansas? And this tiny red dot is Wyandotte County. Here's the metropolitan area of Kansas City for perspective. See Wyandotte? To prepare you for our tools next week, in addition to responding to the question prompts for this week's conferencing exercise, come up with a short list of problems, as we did with the scorecard exercise, that the county faces. Be sure that you're contextualizing within an ecological framework. Then come up with a list of possible steps to intervene. Does this county have the capacity for these steps? Once you determine which steps are doable in Wyandotte, using different data syntheses and prioritization decision tools, analyze how the specific tool led to the decision. This is a snapshot of what we'll be doing in our toolkits next week. And keep in mind the Gulf oil spill as well, because we'll be focusing on community health indicators as our first tool for next week too. Thank you for tuning in, and I really look forward to this week's conferencing exercise because it really forces us to dig deep into these public health concepts and use its methodology.